You are my friend, you are special. You are my friend. You're
Was the beloved Mr. Rogers truly the warm-hearted icon we all cherished? Or is there a deeper, lesser-known side to his story? For decades, he made people of all ages feel valued, understood, and secure. But even with his calm demeanor and soft-spoken words, Fred Rogers carried parts of himself that never made it on camera. Before his passing, his widow came forward with a revelation, one that wasn't scandalous, but incredibly intimate. And what she disclosed might forever reshape the way we remember America's most trusted neighbor. Imagine if the most influential children's program in history didn't depend on loud animations or zany antics, but instead on the sincere voice of one man speaking straight to the hearts of his viewers. Let's take a walk down that quiet lane and reflect on the peaceful revolution Fred sparked with a humble show that quietly left a powerful mark. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the series that transformed childhood. Fred Rogers never had dreams of fame or stardom. What he truly desired was to meet children right where they were, amid their big feelings, innocent questions, and developing hearts. With a gentle voice, sincere gaze, and a welcoming neighborhood, he built something truly unique. When Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood first premiered on PBS in 1968, it stood in sharp contrast to other programs. It lacked flashing graphics, wild characters, or frenzied pacing. Instead, it embraced a stillness that was almost jarring. Fred would enter through the door, take off his jacket, slip into his familiar cardigan, trade dress shoes for sneakers, and start singing, "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" It felt less like a television program, and more like a personal visit from a trusted companion. That was by design. Fred envisioned the show as an emotional learning space. While other children's shows focused on teaching counting and letters, Fred addressed feelings, anger, grief, fear, joy, giving young viewers the vocabulary to process what they were experiencing inside. Subjects like divorce, death, racial equality, and disabilities were explored in a straightforward and compassionate way. The show's slow pace was deliberate. Every detail served a purpose. Episodes would also journey into the imaginary neighborhood of make-believe, a world filled with puppets like King Friday 13th, Daniel Tiger, and Lady Elaine Fairchild, who acted out thoughtful storylines mirroring real-world challenges. Many of the puppets' voices came from Fred himself, with each one expressing a unique facet of his personality. Over the span of 31 seasons, from 1968 through 2001, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood aired 895 episodes. That kind of longevity is rare, especially for a show so focused and quiet in its mission. But its strength never relied on spectacle. It thrived because it had heart. Fred understood that children didn't need more chaos. They needed calm. They needed truth. And most of all, they needed someone who would take them seriously. Each episode was like a sanctuary, free from laugh tracks, jarring sound effects, or commercials. Just Fred, looking into the camera, making every viewer feel like the only person in the room. For many kids growing up in unstable households or struggling to find where they fit in, those 30 minutes with Fred Rogers became the safest, most reassuring part of their day. Though the tone remained gentle, the show occasionally welcomed some high-profile guests. Fred brought in people from all walks of life: musicians, artists, scientists, and even animals. These guests didn't just entertain, they connected. Yo-Yo Ma introduced children to the emotional language of music. Julia Child brought her warmth and passion for cooking into the neighborhood. Literacy advocate LeVar Burton, of Reading Rainbow fame, stopped by, as did illusionist David Copperfield, who added a bit of wonder. Singer Tony Bennett shared both his music and his gentle soul. Even Coco the gorilla, who communicated through sign language, shared an unforgettable moment of mutual respect and empathy with Fred. Regardless of fame or profession, every guest was treated with equal kindness and dignity, a reflection of Fred's core belief that everyone deserves to feel valued. The television industry certainly took note. Over time, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood accumulated an impressive list of accolades, including 4 Daytime Emmy Awards for excellence in children's programming and an astounding 55 Emmy nominations throughout its run. The show also received the Cine Golden Eagle Award for episodes like Let's Talk About Going to the Doctor, which approached tough topics with honesty and care. In 1997, Fred was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Daytime Emmys. During his speech, he requested the audience pause for 10 seconds to silently reflect on the people who had helped shape them into who they were. The room fell into a reverent hush. It wasn't about applause or trophies for Fred. It was about meaningful human connection. His true prize was knowing that children across the world felt acknowledged and loved. Even after the series concluded in 2001, its impact continued. Thanks to platforms like YouTube and streaming services, new generations are still discovering Fred's warm, patient voice. His legacy lives on not just in reruns but in new creations like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, produced by Fred Rogers Productions, which builds upon Fred's mission using fresh stories and modern characters, but still grounded in emotional intelligence and kindness. Fred once said, "The greatest gift you ever give is your honest self." For over 30 years, he gave that gift freely and wholeheartedly, and in the world he created on screen, that truth still resonates today. To truly grasp the heart of Fred Rogers, you need to understand the woman who stood by his side every step of the way. Their partnership holds surprising depth and beauty. Who was Joanne Rogers? Before the world knew her as Mrs. Fred Rogers, Joanne Bird had already carved her own remarkable path. Her life was far from conventional. Born in 1928 in Jacksonville, Florida, Joanne was raised in a household where curiosity, music, and meaningful dialogue were treasured. Her upbringing wasn't defined by wealth or luxury, but by thoughtfulness and resilience. Her father worked as a traveling salesman, while her mother kept the household steady with love and structure. Joanne absorbed life lessons early: how to speak up with conviction, and perhaps, more importantly, how to truly listen. Music wasn't just a passion for her, it was her soul's language. By elementary school, she had already gained recognition as a gifted pianist, but she never played for applause. She played because it filled her spirit and gave her voice. Joanne Rogers' musical journey was as expansive as it was passionate. She didn't limit herself to one genre. From classical compositions to jazz improvisations and heartfelt folk melodies, she embraced them all. When she earned a spot at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, it became evident that music wasn't just her interest, it was her calling. She wasn't merely chasing a dream, she was forging a distinct path through sound and expression. At Rollins, Joanne chose music performance as her major and quickly distinguished herself. It wasn't just her precision or technique that stood out, but the emotion she poured into every note. Her instructors recognized something rare, and her fellow students were moved by the intensity and authenticity of her playing. Whether performing a solo piece or accompanying a fellow musician, Joanne had a gift. Her playing could convey emotions words failed to capture. But Joanne wasn't someone who craved attention. The limelight didn't entice her. What she valued most were genuine connections, friendships rooted in truth, conversations that went beyond the surface, and the comfort of belonging to a thoughtful community. She had a joyful spirit and a contagious laugh, but she also possessed an intuitive ability to ask the kinds of questions that made you reflect. After completing her undergraduate studies, she went on to study further at Florida State University, and later relocated to Pittsburgh to attend Carnegie Tech, now Carnegie Mellon. There, she not only honed her musical skills but also found a deeper sense of self. During the 1950s, she shared her passion as a teacher at Chatham College's Preparatory School of Music, instilling discipline and wonder in young musicians. In the early 1970s, she taught for 4 years at Carlow College. Alongside teaching, Joanne built a commendable career as a concert pianist. She formed a piano duo with her longtime friend, Janine Morrison, and together they recorded 2 albums, Duo Piano Favorites and A Virtuoso Duo Piano Showcase, both of which were praised for their elegance and synergy. Even in a time when many women were expected to conform to traditional roles, Joanne stayed true to herself. She wasn't seeking to be defined as someone's wife or placed in the background. Her life vision included artistic freedom, independence, and personal fulfillment. Whether she was performing on stage or having a heart-to-heart conversation, she exuded sincerity, humor, and inner peace. In recognition of her lifelong devotion to the arts and education, Duquesne University awarded her an honorary degree in 2019, a fitting tribute to her quiet yet powerful legacy. So when her path eventually aligned with someone who mirrored her integrity and creative spirit, it felt less like chance and more like destiny. It was the perfect meeting of two kindred spirits. The love story behind the legend. It's tempting to view a marriage that lasts decades as simply a picture-perfect narrative. Matching outfits, smiles for the public, a tidy home life. But with Fred and Joanne Rogers, what made their bond extraordinary wasn't what was shown, but what was quietly shared. Their romance didn't begin with fireworks. It was born in the stillness of shared melodies and silent understanding inside a college music hall in Florida. Their first meeting happened in the late 1940s at Rollins College. Both were dedicated music majors, immersed in their art and unaware that they were about to become the most significant person in each other's life. Joanne wasn't one to be easily swept off her feet. With her background in music and sharp intuition, she could read sincerity in an instant. It wasn't Fred's ambition that drew her in. It was his gentleness, his ability to listen with his full presence, and the kindness that radiated from his every word. Their bond blossomed in the quiet corners of campus. Rehearsals, shared performances, and long conversations that felt effortless. They didn't build their relationship on theatrics or extravagant gestures. Instead, it was grounded in trust, emotional understanding, and a shared tempo of life. Though music brought them together, it was their mutual respect and emotional clarity that made their partnership profound. After graduation, life didn't immediately pave an easy road for them. Fred moved to New York City to begin a career with NBC, while Joanne remained in Florida. Maintaining a long-distance relationship in those days required more than commitment. It took devotion. No phones at your fingertips, no instant messages. Just handwritten letters passed through time and distance, each one filled with longing, sincerity, and the slow-building foundation of a lifelong bond. Then came the letter that changed everything: Fred's marriage proposal. Hidden within the lines of a routine note was the question that would define both their futures. Joanne, filled with emotion, raced to a nearby phone booth to say yes before she even finished the letter. In her rush, she nearly misplaced the proposal, but she kept it safe from then on, knowing that single piece of paper marked the beginning of something deeply enduring. The couple married in 1952 and embarked on a journey of over 50 years together. Their marriage wasn't polished perfection. It was lively, filled with laughter, support, occasional chaos, and unwavering love. Music remained central to their lives. They often played piano duets, celebrating the harmony and laughing off the imperfections. They built their own inside jokes and shorthand communication. And when the world demanded more of Fred, Joanne was his shelter, his peace. Together, they had two sons, James and John. Their home was structured, yet full of warmth. Joanne was not just the mother of Fred's children. She was the stabilizing force behind his success. She safeguarded his creative space, nurtured his emotional well-being, and offered honest feedback when needed. She understood his silences, respected his routines, and held sacred the parts of him the public never saw. Most importantly, she loved him without trying to mold him into someone else. Many assumed that Fred Rogers was a simple man. Kind, yes, but without complication. Those who truly knew him, especially Joanne, recognized that he carried immense emotional depth. He bore the burdens of others' pain, struggled with feelings of inadequacy, and feared not doing enough. Joanne embraced all of it. She held his complexities with compassion and allowed him the space to be tender, worried, imperfect, and fully human. Despite Fred's growing fame, their marriage stayed deeply rooted in authenticity. They didn't live for fame. They lived for quiet mornings at the piano, spontaneous laughter, and a bond that thrived in ordinary moments. Their love wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, real, vulnerable, and deliberately chosen again and again for over 5 decades. To the world, Fred Rogers was a comforting voice in a cardigan. But behind the gentle demeanor and in the quiet spaces beyond the screen, Joanne saw the real Fred, his private thoughts, his quiet discipline, his fears. and she kept those pieces of him sacred. Perhaps that's the true magic of their story. Not that it was flawless, but that it was genuine. And in choosing each other, day after day, they wrote a love story that will outlast any television legacy. The Private Fred Rogers. The contrast between public icon and private man. When someone hears the name Fred Rogers, the image that instantly comes to mind is likely that of a gentle man in a soft cardigan, carefully tying his sneakers, speaking as though you were the only person in the world who truly mattered. His voice had the cadence of a lullaby, slow, comforting, and steady. To many, Fred was far more than a television presenter. He was a beacon of safety during childhood, a steady hand guiding little hearts through life's complexities. Over time, people began to believe that what they saw on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was Fred in his truest form, genuine, unfiltered, and unchanged. And truthfully, for the most part, it was. Fred Rogers lived by the principles he promoted. Kindness wasn't just a public act. It was a personal commitment he honored every day, whether or not anyone was watching. Those close to him, colleagues, friends, and family, repeatedly vouched for this. However, what made Fred's life story especially meaningful wasn't a facade of perfection. It was the fact that he wasn't flawless at all. His wife of over 50 years, Joanne Rogers, once remarked that while Fred was every bit as kind as his reputation suggested, he wasn't a saint. Not in the untouchable, polished sense people might assume. She knew the man beneath the image, someone who got tired, who wrestled with doubts, who bore the weight of expectations. Fred's warmth was real, but it was a choice he made daily. He worked hard to be kind, and there's something refreshingly sincere about that kind of deliberate goodness. Outwardly, Fred exuded effortless calm, but behind the scenes was a quiet resolve that governed his daily actions. He had strict personal routines, such as swimming each morning and monitoring his weight, always aiming to stay at 143 pounds. That number carried emotional symbolism for him. 1 letter for I, 4 for love, and 3 for you. A small habit, yet deeply meaningful. But with the warmth and gentleness he projected came an invisible weight. With millions of children looking up to him, the pressure to embody his values all the time was immense. Though he never publicly expressed the toll it took, Joanne could see the weariness it sometimes caused. There were moments in their marriage that tested them both. Like any enduring relationship, theirs experienced challenges. Joanne has shared that in their household, she was typically the disciplinarian with their 2 sons, while Fred tended to approach parenting with his signature gentleness, sometimes making it hard for him to enforce rules. That imbalance at times was difficult for them both. Fred poured himself completely into his work. Every ounce of energy, care, and thoughtfulness was invested in his mission. That deep emotional involvement could be exhausting, not just for him, but for those around him. While his work was rooted in compassion, it carried heavy emotional labor. Often it was Joanne who became his anchor, holding steady while Fred carried the emotional burdens of countless others. What makes Fred's story so resonant is its humanity. Society loves to place certain figures on pedestals, elevating them to hero status and expecting them to remain unshakable. But Fred never aspired to that illusion. He accepted his reality, that he was human, prone to missteps, reliant on others for support. Joanne helped the world see that version of Fred, not to diminish his legacy, but to enhance it, to show that real virtue isn't effortless. Fred was deeply empathetic. His love for people ran so deep that it sometimes left him vulnerable. Yet he continued to choose grace. He chose kindness. He chose to see the best in people and to act from a place of love, even when it would have been easier not to. That daily commitment is what transformed a humble man in a cardigan into a timeless symbol of compassion. But even beneath that kindness and serenity, Joanne later revealed a difficult reality, an awful truth that peeled back yet another layer of understanding. The awful truth. When people hear the phrase awful truth, they often brace for scandal, something unexpected and dramatic. But what Joanne Rogers revealed about her husband wasn't a salacious secret. It was something far more subtle, poignant, and universally human, a truth made heavier because of its quiet pain and gentle strength. Fred Rogers, the warm-hearted presence millions welcomed into their homes, lived his final days not just in a struggle against illness, but also navigating profound emotional and spiritual terrain. Joanne, as his lifelong partner, witnessed these private moments, chapters of vulnerability and resilience the public never saw. His battle with stomach cancer was more than a medical ordeal. It was a slow, intimate reckoning with mortality and legacy. The illness struck without warning. At first, Fred merely experienced some mild discomfort and digestive issues, easy enough to dismiss or attribute to stress. Joanne recalled how he tried to handle it privately, watching his diet and monitoring the pain in silence. But eventually, the discomfort became impossible to ignore, prompting them to seek medical help. The diagnosis came like a thunderclap. The cancer had advanced, and the prognosis was grim. Those final months were filled with both physical challenges and emotional revelations. Fred, ever the steady presence, tried to maintain normalcy. He stayed active, stayed engaged. In January 2003, just weeks before his death, he fulfilled his role as Grand Marshal in the Rose Parade in Pasadena. It was a fleeting moment of public light amid a backdrop of private darkness, a testament to his unwavering commitment to those who believed in him. After undergoing surgery to remove part of his stomach, Fred spent a short time in the hospital before returning home. Joanne described how even in weakness, music remained a refuge. Sitting at the piano, he would find fleeting moments of serenity and escape. On February 27, 2003, surrounded by his loved ones, Fred passed away quietly at home, just one day after celebrating his grandson's birthday. For a long time, Joanne chose not to share these details. Her silence wasn't driven by shame, but by reverence, for Fred's privacy, and for the public image he had so carefully cultivated. Yet as years went by, she began to feel that this side of his story, the private pain, the courage, the humanity, deserved to be known. It wasn't about tarnishing his legacy, but rather deepening it. One of the most moving elements in Joanne's reflections was the shift that occurred in their relationship during Fred's illness. For decades, he had been the unwavering support system of their family. But as his health declined, Joanne stepped into the role of caregiver. It wasn't easy. The emotional and physical demands were heavy, yet she met them with grace and devotion. She speaks of experiencing both deep affection and the emotional burden that came with watching someone so full of life face such a formidable challenge. There were moments when the man she loved and revered was also someone who simply needed her care, her calm, and at times just her silent presence to help bear the weight of his suffering. In later interviews and documentaries, like the celebrated "Won't You Be My Neighbor?", Joanne Rogers offered rare glimpses into stories from Fred's final years that had never been shared before. One example was how his signature humor never abandoned him, even in the face of deteriorating health. His ability to find levity amid hardship remained intact, though it took on a quieter, more tender form, revealing a powerful yet different version of the man everyone thought they knew. In the final stretch of his life, Joanne recalled one moment in particular during an interview. She told him, "You know, we're going to be all right. The boys will be fine. I'm going to do my best to be fine." She remembered that when he passed, she felt he had gone in peace, with something close to joy in his heart. Joanne's decision to share these deeply personal memories came not out of obligation, but from a sincere desire to honor Fred in a more authentic and vulnerable way. She knew how deeply people revered him and how his name had come to symbolize comfort and hope. Exactly 2 years after Fred's passing, she remarked, "Wouldn't it be something if grief worked on a schedule? If you could say, 'That's enough mourning, time to move on.' But it's never like that. Some days I feel full of energy, other days I feel completely drained. Grief, in many ways, is exhausting." Through these reflections, Joanne invites us to understand Fred Rogers not as an infallible public figure, but as a man who, like everyone else, had to grapple with heartache and fear. Still, in the midst of all that, he remained committed to choosing compassion and sincerity until his final breath. That truth, far from being tragic, is actually empowering. After Fred passed, Joanne didn't simply retreat into memory or silence. Instead, what she did next would surprise and inspire many. Joanne Rogers' role in preserving and promoting Fred's legacy. When Fred Rogers died in 2003, many assumed Joanne would retreat into quiet remembrance, privately mourning the loss of her partner. But Joanne chose a different road. Rather than stepping away, she became a powerful voice and tireless champion of everything Fred had stood for. Over 5 decades of shared life had taught her not just to support Fred's mission, but to embody it. And she ensured his spirit continued to echo far beyond his final day. Joanne wasn't just a symbolic figurehead. She took on a real leadership role as chair emerita of Fred Rogers Productions, the organization her husband had built to create his meaningful programming. As the media landscape evolved, Joanne worked diligently to ensure the heart of Fred's philosophy stayed intact. The shows continued, still focused on helping children explore emotions, foster friendships, and understand themselves and others, all while retaining that same gentle, deliberate tone that made Fred's work timeless. Because of her guidance, Fred's message didn't become just a nostalgic memory. It remained alive, vibrant, and ever relevant to new generations. Joanne also embraced the public spotlight. She frequently shared stories about Fred, offering heartfelt reflections on his values, his quirks, and his deep belief in kindness. Her voice extended Fred's teachings beyond the television screen and into schools, events, and homes that had never seen the original neighborhood. She wasn't just a quiet custodian of his legacy. She was its loudest, most loyal advocate. When the 2019 film, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, was released, Joanne even made a cameo appearance. That wasn't just casting. It was her way of stepping into their story once again, adding a touch of realness and intimacy to the fictionalized account of their life together. Her brief scene gave audiences a glimpse of the woman who knew Fred best and had helped shape his message behind the scenes. Beyond these public appearances, Joanne also shared her own passions. A gifted concert pianist, she found her own way of connecting with people through music. Her art, like Fred's words, resonated deeply, reminding others that creativity and kindness are often intertwined. Those who knew her personally often remarked on her wit, her calm insight, and her quiet resilience, all traits that perfectly balanced Fred's warmth and made her the ideal partner in keeping his work and values alive. Following Fred's passing in 2003, the messages he championed continued to ripple through the world he held so dear. None more symbolic than the unique, heartfelt number sequence he held sacred. If you had ever asked Fred what love looked like, his answer might have come in 3 simple digits: 1, 4, 3. You might remember that earlier. It wasn't just a cute phrase or numerical quirk. It was something much deeper. 1, for I. 4, for love. 3, for you. Simple, meaningful, and deeply personal. It wasn't something to be spoken loudly or flaunted. It was something to be lived quietly, but with intention. And Fred lived it every day. He didn't merely preach love. He built his entire existence around it. For the majority of his adult life, he even maintained his weight at exactly 143 pounds as a nod to this personal philosophy. That's a rare kind of symbolic discipline, one where every choice, every action, even every pause, reflects the values you hold most dear. And Fred's reverence for 143 didn't fade after his death. In 2019, his home state of Pennsylvania honored him in a beautifully fitting way. They officially designated May 23rd, the 143rd day of the year, as 143 Day. The purpose? Encourage kindness, do a good deed, be a better neighbor. Fred would have loved that. Joanne herself passed away on January 14, 2021, at the age of 92, in the comfort of their Pittsburgh home. She was surrounded by those who loved her, just as Fred would have wanted. She is survived by their 2 sons and by a legacy that now sits beside Fred's. Equally rich, equally enduring. Together, Fred and Joanne didn't seek fame. They didn't need glitz or glamour. They believed that love wasn't loud, but steady. Not flashy, but powerful. That it could be expressed in the quietest of ways, even through 3 little numbers. Now that Joanne has shared the more complex, hidden layers of Fred Rogers' life, one must ask, Was there an unspoken truth behind that gentle smile? A truth he carried quietly to his grave while the world, perhaps unknowingly, chose not to see. We want to hear your thoughts. Drop your opinions in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And for more heartfelt stories like this one, tap on the next video now.